I've been working with Hasselblad's digital medium format cameras for about a year and a half at this point. I started out with the 907X 50C, then I was finally able to get the X2D, which I absolutely loved. And building upon that, I was able to get this, the X2D Earth Explorer, which included this 55V lens. And this is the 55V lens that I purchased back in March of this year. Now, in a previous video of mine, I had mentioned that the 55V lens is my absolute favorite lens in the Hasselblad lineup that I've used. And I also mentioned that despite owning one, I currently didn't have it in my possession, and that would be a story for another time. So this is the story of my biggest complaint with Hasselblad. So this story initially starts out back in June of this year, 2024. I purchased the XCD 55V lens back in March, and within only a couple times of using it, it quickly became my favorite lens to use. The focal length was fantastic for the type of photography that I typically do. I love the wide aperture. The autofocus was much more responsive than the other lenses that I had at the time, which were all the previous generation XCD lenses. Overall, I thought this lens was absolutely a hit. And one evening I was messing around with my cameras and I wanted to try to get a shot. And so I grabbed the XCD 55V, and so I kind of set up my shot. For this particular shot that I was trying to get, I was using the 907X, and for some reason the photo just kept turning out really dark, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. It was a darker scene, so I was kind of guessing the exposure a little bit. It wasn't exactly a one-to-one for what I was seeing on the back screen, but even still, it just was so much darker than what I thought I should be getting. And at first I thought, oh my god, I wonder if there's something wrong with the sensor on the 907X, like that would be terrible. That would be really a bad day. So I grabbed the X2D and tried to attach the lens to it, and it said that there was no lens recognized. Now, I'd taken the X2D and the 55V out a couple weeks prior to the woods where I was using it, and I'd had a similar problem happen, but I just restarted the camera. That fixed it the one time. It actually happened again, so I just took out the battery and put it back in, kind of a hard reset if you will, and then that fixed it, and that was the last of the errors. So I didn't really think too much of it at the time. But this time, no matter what I did, restarting the camera, taking out the battery, making sure that the contact pins were clean for both the camera body and the lens, nothing was getting the X2D to recognize the lens. So I put it back on the 907X and it recognized the lens this time, which I thought, okay, that's odd, but I'm still not getting the result from the photo that I'm expecting. And that was when I noticed that the shutter in the lens, all of the blades for the aperture were just slammed shut. So basically it was just forcing me into like an f32 aperture no matter what I set on the camera. And no matter what I did, no matter what kind of setting I tried, I couldn't get the aperture to change. The leaf shutter was just closed down on itself. So I thought, okay, well, you know, this is a bad day. I just gotten the lens, a couple months ago. Again, this was in June. I'd gotten the lens in March, but I figured, hey, I mean, this is probably under warranty, right? Let me contact Hasselblad support and see what they can do. Now, I'd like to be very clear about this point. Hasselblad support was fantastic to work with. They were communicative, they were incredibly responsive. Everyone that I was in contact with from that group was wonderful. So when I let them know about my issue, they were like, yep, absolutely, it's still under warranty, so I'll send you a UPS shipping label, you can send it back to us and we'll take a look at it. They also requested that I include the X2D body along with it so they can test if there was something wrong with my camera body or if it was just the lens. So a little bit sad to kind of give up my X2D since there was a shoot coming up that I wanted to use it with. I sent back both the camera body and the lens, and I think about a week and a half or so, maybe 10 days later, they got back to me and said, yep, the camera body is working fine. We've noticed an issue with the lens, so we're going to send you back the camera body and we'll continue to work on fixing the lens. I thought, okay, great. So some more time passes, and again, I'm kind of thinking like, man, you know, I really miss that lens. It'd be great to use it. Again, at this point, it'd probably been gone about a month. And what Hasselblad needed to do was actually ship the lens over to Japan to their manufacturer to try to get this lens repaired. And that's where the fun began. So a couple weeks had passed. Hadn't really heard anything, so I sent an email back to Hasselblad support just asking for an update. Like, hey, you've had the lens for about a month now. Any ETA on when I can expect to get that back? You know, I'd love to be able to use it. It's summer. It's my favorite lens that I've used, as I mentioned, so want to keep using it. I've only had it for a couple months. And again, very quickly they replied back like, oh yeah, you know, sorry for the delay. Unfortunately, it is with our manufacturer in Japan and it's, you know, getting worked on. We don't have a lot of insight into the timeline since it's their working queue. Thought, okay, I mean, that makes sense. But they're like, you know, normally this can take 2 to 3 months. Thought, my God, okay, well, 2 to 3 months for a repair is kind of a long time, in my opinion at least. And again, I completely recognize that obviously Hasselblad is a smaller manufacturer. They're not pumping out the volume of cameras and lenses like, Canon, Sony, Nikon. So sure, things like this might take a little bit of a longer time to get addressed. Well, the 2 to 3 month period came and went, and I was getting ready for my big trip to Morocco, and I really wanted to have this lens for that trip. So sent another email back out to Hasselblad and said, hey, end of September, I'm going on a really big trip. I would love to have this lens for that trip to be able to use. Is there an ETA to be able to get the lens back? And once again, very quickly and very professionally, Hasselblad replied back, we're really sorry for the delay. It's still with our manufacturer. Trying to get an ETA. It should be back to you mid-September. I was like, okay, well, mid-September, that's kind of tight just because my trip was at the end of September. I wanted to allow some time for shipping delays or anything else. So I was like, hey, if it's possible at all, can you please request any kind of expedition on the repair at all? I've got this really big trip coming up at the end of September. I'd love to have it back by September 12th, let's say, right? And they replied back saying, unfortunately, they really couldn't do anything to try to expedite it. It was entirely in the hands of their manufacturer, but they would make a note of it so that as soon as they got it back, they would rush shipping back to me so that I could have it as quickly as possible, which I thought was incredibly generous of them to do. Again, understanding that a lot of this is going to be out of the support team's hands, but they're trying where they can to still ensure that I have a decent experience with this, right? Well, mid-September rolls around. Still no news, still haven't gotten the lens back. Now, some of you have seen my other video talking about getting the X2D Earth Explorer, and I was thrilled because I figured, okay, well, this is great. I can get the camera, a limited edition of a camera that means a lot to me personally. And hey, I'll get a second XCD 55V lens with it too. Fantastic. So that's actually how I was able to still use the 55V on my trip during Morocco and New York. By the way, a video of my trip to New York will be coming soon. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so you can see that video as soon as it comes out. And so all of that brings us to today, November 1st. I finally got the lens back. It took 5 months for a repair. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know what the exact issue was. I don't know how mechanically demanding this repair was. Obviously, this wasn't just a quick diagnosis and a software update. I'm sure there had to be something more involved for it to take this long, but 5 months, that's a long time to get a repair done. I mean, for context, I had the lens only for 3 months when it broke. So it's been gone and out of my possession. I haven't been able to use it for a longer period of time than when I had it. Again, a couple points I want to quickly reiterate. The support team was fantastic and very communicative. This was covered under warranty, so I didn't need to pay a dime to get this resolved. And finally, I absolutely understand that Hasselblad is a more boutique manufacturer. They aren't operating at the same kind of volumes as other manufacturers like Nikon, Sony, and Canon. But if you're someone that is using the Hasselblad platform professionally and you're relying on that gear to work, if something like this happens and you're out a lens for almost half a year, that can be incredibly disruptive to your professional workflow. That can potentially affect client work. Thankfully, I'm not in that position. Photography for me is something that I do for myself. I'm not a professional photographer in the same sense as someone that is working actively and using that as a source of income. So I do feel that I'm fortunate in that sense that this didn't have a negative impact on me financially or for my business. But I wanted to make the video for any of you out there that are, and you're considering the Hasselblad system. I love the Hasselblad cameras. I think that the image quality is astounding. They are my favorite cameras that I've ever used. But if you're looking into this system for professional work, just know that you may want to have some backup lenses for the ones that you use a lot. Again, for me, the XCD 55V is kind of my main lens. That's the one that I reach for most often and I really enjoy using. But to spend almost $4,000 on a backup lens that I may or may not use just in case the one fails. Again, as someone that's not working in photography professionally to that level, that's a hard pill to swallow. So I have no intention of holding on to both lenses. When I picked up the X2D Earth Explorer Edition, my intent from the start was to sell the X2D that I previously had along with the other 55V lens as soon as it came back from getting repaired. Now, I will absolutely make sure that the lens is working properly before I sell it. I'm not trying to pass off anything to anyone else, but these camera systems are expensive. There's no way around that. So the decision to spend more money on a spare lens on the off chance you need it is again a difficult one to make. So what does this mean? Am I going to stop using Hasselblad? No, absolutely not. I love these cameras. I'm going to continue using these, and I'm going to make sure that they don't just sit on a shelf and collect dust. But again, I wanted to make this video so that anyone out there that's looking at getting into one of these systems can understand that there are risks you take with getting into not just an expensive brand, but a more boutique brand that isn't going to be able to have the support services or the expediency at repairs that some of the other major brands might have. So for those of you that were asking in the comments about the 55V and what happened to it, that's the story, and that is my biggest issue with Hasselblad. I hope that you found this video useful in some way, or at least informative. If you did, please consider giving it a like, subscribe if you're new here. There will be more videos coming again from Morocco and also my New York trip, all of which were shot on the X2D Earth Explorer edition. And for the New York video specifically, almost all of the photos on that were shot on the 55V lens. So please stay tuned for those as they come up. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.